He opened the security app, expecting to catch her slipping up. 12 caregivers before her had failed, stolen from him, betrayed him, sold his secrets to rivals, left his sons worse than they found them. In his world, trust was a luxury that got men killed. So when Marcus Kane saw those 3 wheelchairs sitting empty in the middle of the living room, his stomach dropped. His mind raced through every worst-case scenario, kidnapping, an inside job, another betrayal. Then he saw them, his 3 paralyzed sons, standing, taking steps, walking toward her outstretched arms. Marcus's phone slipped from his hand. It clattered against the conference table, but he didn't hear it. He didn't hear Danny calling his name. He didn't see the confused faces of his underbosses staring at him. All he saw was that screen, 3 small bodies doing what every doctor said was impossible. Lucas stepped first, 1 inch forward. Ethan followed. 2 shaky steps. Noah, the smallest, the weakest, lifted his foot and walked. Marcus Kane, the king, the man who made all of Chicago. Fear his name slid down in his chair legs, unable to hold him. And the man who had accepted impossible as final watched it shatter on a phone screen in his own meeting room. 2 years ago, Marcus Kane lost everything that mattered. His wife Victoria died during childbirth. 50 minutes after delivering triplets, she was gone. No warning, no goodbye, just a cold hospital room and 3 premature babies fighting for their lives. The doctors said it was a hemorrhage. They said there was nothing they could do. Marcus had killed men for less. But death doesn't negotiate, not even with kings. He held her hand until it went cold. Her last words echoed in his skull. "Promise me, you'll let them know, love not fear." Then he walked out to meet his sons, Lucas, Ethan, Noah. 3 tiny bodies wrapped in wires and tubes. 3 uncertain futures. The doctors didn't wait long to deliver the second blow. Cerebral palsy. All 3 boys. Severe, the kind that settles into muscles and bones and never lets go. "Mr. Kane, we need to prepare you. Based on the brain imaging and muscle response tests, walking is highly unlikely. Possibly never." Marcus heard the words, but they didn't land. Not then. He was still burying his wife in his mind, still hearing her voice, still feeling her hand go limp in his. He had built an empire from nothing. He had survived bullets, betrayals, and wars that left other men in graves. But standing in that hospital, looking at his 3 sons, who would never walk Marcus Kane, felt something he hadn't felt since he was 15 years old, watching his father die. Helpless. And in his world, helpless men didn't survive. But before we go any further, if you've ever felt like hope was too dangerous to hold on to, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button and like this video. Because sometimes miracles don't ask for permission, they just show up. Now let's continue. The black limousine rolled to a stop in front of the mansion's wrought iron gates. Marcus Kane stepped out his black suit, still carrying the faint perfume of funeral flowers. He stood there for a long while, looking up at the 35-room house Victoria had chosen. She loved the old stone walls, the soaring ceilings, the wide windows that drank in sunlight. She said this house had a soul. Now the only soul Marcus could feel was emptiness. He remembered the first time he met Victoria 7 years ago at a party neither of them wanted to attend. She was Romano's daughter, the Northern Mafia boss, the sworn enemy of the Kane family. Victoria stood alone on a balcony, moonlight spilling over her dark hair like silver laid by hand. Marcus walked toward her, not out of strategy or calculation, but because he couldn't not walk toward her. They talked until late into the night. About books, about music, about dreams they both had to bury, because they were born into the wrong families. When Marcus asked if she was afraid to love an enemy, Victoria looked straight into his eyes and said, "I don't love the king, I love Marcus." It was the first time in his life someone had truly seen him, not the empire, no, not the power, just him. And now that person was gone. Marcus walked into the house and down the long hollow corridor. His steps stopped in front of a door painted a pale buttery yellow. The nursery. Victoria had spent 3 months designing that room. She had chosen every wallpaper pattern herself, painted the mural of the moon and stars with her own hands. 3 cribs were arranged in a half circle so the children could see one another when they woke. She said that mattered so they'd know they were never alone. Marcus pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room wasn't what it had been. The cribs had been replaced with medical beds fitted with safety rails. The moon mural was hidden behind heart monitors and medical equipment tangled with wires. In one corner, wheelchairs, walkers, and therapy tools were stacked high. A room built for dreams had become a storage space for a brutal reality. Marcus had hired the best specialists. He flew doctors in from Switzerland, Germany, Japan. He bought equipment worth millions of dollars and tried every advanced treatment he could reach. Money wasn't the problem. Power wasn't the problem. But nothing changed. Lucas, Ethan, Noah still lay there, their small bodies, nearly motionless, their eyes fixed somewhere far away, as if they were in another world he couldn't touch. Margaret, the housekeeper, who had worked for the Kane family for 20 years, stood at the living room doorway as Marcus passed. She was the only person in that house who dared meet his gaze without trembling. "Have you eaten anything, sir?" Marcus didn't answer. "The children need you, Mr. Kane. Lady Victoria wouldn't want you disappearing from their lives like this." Marcus stopped. His back went rigid. "Lady Victoria isn't here anymore to want anything, Margaret." His voice was cold as steel. But Margaret didn't step back. She had watched Marcus grow from a 15-year-old boy who lost his father into the most feared boss in Chicago. She knew that behind the ice was a heart bleeding out. "Because she's not here, the children need you even more." Marcus didn't turn around. He kept walking into his study and shut the door. He couldn't make Margaret understand. Every time he looked into the children's eyes, he saw Victoria. Every time he touched their hands, he felt the helplessness grinding him down from the inside. He had failed to save his wife. He was failing to save his sons. And Marcus Kane didn't know how to live with failure. That night, when the entire mansion had fallen into silence, Marcus stood outside the therapy room door. He didn't turn on the lights. He just stood there in the dark listening. The steady pulse of the heart monitor, the soft breathing of 3 tiny lives. His hand rested on the doorknob. Ice cold. He wanted to go in, to sit beside them, to hold their hands, to tell them their father was here. But he didn't dare. Because if he went in there, if he let himself love them without restraint, and then lost them the way he'd lost Victoria, he wouldn't survive it. Marcus pulled his hand back. He turned and walked away. If he couldn't save them, at least he could protect them. From the outside world, from false hope, from himself. But walls built to protect sometimes become a prison. 18 months after Victoria's death, Marcus Kane had watched 12 caregivers come and go. 12 faces, 12 promises, 12 betrayals. The first was a young nurse, introduced as a specialist in children with cerebral palsy. She lasted 2 weeks, then quit, leaving a small note on the table. "I can't look at them like this every day. It's too heartbreaking." Marcus wasn't angry, he only felt contempt. Heartbreaking, as if her pain could be measured against. Watching his own children lie unmoving every night. The third seemed perfect. Linda, 45 years old, 20 years of experience, highly rated in her field. She cared for the children, attentively filed thorough reports, never once complained. Until Danny discovered she'd sold photos of the children's medical equipment to a tabloid for $600. The headline they planned to run was "Mafia Boss Family and 3 Disabled Children." Marcus didn't say a word. He only looked at Danny, and Danny understood. Linda disappeared. No one asked where she went. The 7th was an addict. She stole pain medication from the family cabinet and replaced it with vitamins so no one would notice. When Ethan went into a pain episode and the medicine did nothing, Marcus learned the truth. The 9th was bolder. She accessed Marcus's financial system, transferred $100,000 into an anonymous account, then vanished into the night. Marcus found her within 48 hours. The money was returned, and she never got the chance to spend it. But the 12th was the one who made Marcus realize just how blind he'd been. Helen, 50 years old, once a head nurse at a renowned hospital. She had a clean record, flawless references, and an air of trustworthiness so convincing even Margaret nodded her approval. Helen worked 3 months, 3 months of caring for the children without a single complaint. Then one night, the listening system Danny had installed on every employee's phone caught a call. The Kane kids are like vegetables. No movement, no response. Kane spends all day in his office, barely looks at them. He's weak. This is the right time to act. The voice on the other end belonged to Vincent Torres. Marcus listened to the recording in silence. His face showed nothing, but Danny, who'd been at his side for 20 years, could see a storm forming in those cold gray eyes. Vincent Torres. The name cut into the past like a blade. 10 years earlier, Marcus had taken the South Chicago territory from Vincent in a blood-soaked war. Vincent had lost everything, forced to flee north, forced to rebuild an empire from ashes. And for 10 years he'd waited for a moment of weakness, waited for a crack. And now he'd found one. A king who knows how to love is a king who knows how to bleed. Vincent had once said in a meeting with allies, "Kane lost his wife, his children are ruined, he's drowning in grief. This is when we strike." Helen vanished that same night. No one found her. And the next morning, Marcus ordered cameras installed in every corner of the house. The living room, the corridors, the therapy room, the kitchen, even the garden. Not 1 inch of the estate escaped the electronic eye. Every night he sat in his office, staring into those bluish screens, rewinding footage segment by segment, zooming into every corner, searching for the betrayal he knew was coming. Margaret stood at his office door, watching him with worried eyes. "Sir, the children need someone with them. Someone real, not cameras." Marcus didn't look up. People betray Margaret. Cameras don't, but cameras can't hold them when they cry. They can't sing to them when they're afraid. Marcus finally looked at her. His eyes were as cold as a Chicago winter. 12 people have walked into this house. 12 people have betrayed me. I don't need a 13th. Margaret wanted to say more, but she knew that when Marcus Kane had decided, no one could change him. She only shook her head sadly and walked away. That night, Danny Vance called. "Boss, I found someone." Marcus didn't answer right away. She has nothing to lose. Her father owed us $2 million. He's dead. She has no money, no family, no way out. She won't dare betray you. What's her name? Sophia Hayes, 27 years old. Former pediatric nurse, specialized in rehabilitation. Marcus looked at the camera monitor where his 3 children lay motionless in the therapy room. He didn't trust anyone, but his children needed someone. And Danny Vance had found exactly that, a woman with nothing left to lose. The studio apartment on Chicago's South Side was only about 30 square meters. The walls were blotched with damp stains. The window looked out onto a dark alley piled with trash, and the wail of ambulances echoed through the night again and again. Sophia Hayes sat on a narrow single bed, staring at the stack of debt letters on the table. A notice that the electricity would be shut off. A notice that the water would be shut off. A bank letter threatening to repossess the apartment, and a photograph of her parents turned face down because she couldn't bear to meet their eyes. A knock sounded at the door. Sophia wasn't surprised. She'd been waiting for this for a long time. The men who came to collect her father's debts would show up sooner or later. But the man outside wasn't like the thugs she'd imagined. He was middle-aged, around 45, wearing a black suit. His face hard but not cruel. Danny Vance, she knew that name. In Chicago, who didn't know Marcus Kane's right hand. "Ms. Hayes," Danny said, his voice as calm as if he were talking about the weather. "I'm here to discuss your father's debt." Sophia opened the door wider and let him in. She didn't have anything left to fear. You can't threaten someone who's already lost everything. Danny sat in the only chair in the room and looked around the miserable apartment. "Your father, Thomas Hayes, owed $2 million. He was a good surgeon, but he was even better at gambling. 3 years, $2 million. An impressive number." Sophia didn't react. She already knew this story. Her father, the man who once taught her that integrity was everything, had collapsed after her brother died in a traffic accident. He turned to gambling as a way to run, and when he couldn't run anymore, he turned to death. 6 months ago, our people found him in his car at the docks, 2 bullets to the head, Danny continued. "It wasn't us, if you're wondering. He owed a lot of people, not just us, but the debt is still there." Sophia swallowed. "My mother." 2 months later, she overdosed on sleeping pills. Sophia closed her eyes. She didn't cry. Her tears had dried up a long time ago, since she lost. She didn't let herself think about it. "So what are you here for? I don't have $2 million. I don't even have 200. Danny set a folder on the table. "Mr. Kane purchased your father's debt from the other creditors. All $2 million belongs to him now." Sophia stared at the folder as if it were a venomous snake. "What does he want?" "He has 3 sons, 2 years old, severe cerebral palsy. They need a professional caregiver." Danny opened the folder and slid it toward her. "You're a pediatric nurse, specialized in rehabilitation. You'll work for Mr. Kane for 5 years. After that, the debt is erased." Sophia skimmed the contract. 5 years living in the Kane mansion. Caring for 3 children with cerebral palsy. Not allowed to leave. Not allowed to disclose anything about the family. A violation meant serious consequences. She was being bought. no different from a modern slave. But what choice did she have? I agree. Sophia took the pen and signed her name with a steady hand. She didn't shake. She'd shaken too much over the past 2 years. Now all she had left was numbness. 3 days later, a black car drove Sophia to the Kane estate. She stepped out, lifted her eyes, and looked up at the massive house in front of her. 35 rooms, old stone walls, towering iron gates, like a castle from a fairy tale. But the air here was cold and heavy, as if the walls themselves were in mourning. Margaret was waiting at the front door. When she saw Sophia, the old woman's face brightened a little. At last someone young. These walls need life. Sophia didn't know how to respond. She only nodded in greeting. Margaret led her through long corridors, empty rooms' walls, without a single photograph. Finally, they stopped in front of a door. "The therapy room," Margaret said. "The children are in there." Sophia pushed the door open and stepped inside. Late afternoon sunlight poured through the window, falling across 3 tiny wheelchairs set in the middle of the room. 3 children, 3 small bodies nearly motionless. Lucas, Ethan, Noah. Sophia had read their medical files: spastic cerebral palsy, severe loss of motor function, almost no ability to walk. But the files hadn't prepared her for this feeling. Seeing 3 small pairs of eyes, 3 angel faces, 3 lives trapped inside bodies that wouldn't obey their will. Sophia moved closer. She knelt in front of Lucas's wheelchair, the oldest, and then it happened. Lucas looked at her, not the distant, unfocused stare she'd seen described in reports. The little boy truly looked at her, his small brown eyes fixed on her face as if he were trying to read who she was. Margaret stood beside her and whispered, "They know when someone sees them, not seeing their condition, seeing them." Sophia felt something crack inside her chest. She'd signed the contract with a steady hand, but when Lucas looked at her, truly looked at her, she understood she wasn't only paying off a debt. She had lost a child. Maybe she could save 3. The next morning, Marcus Kane summoned Sophia to his office. He sat behind a massive oak desk and didn't look up at her, his eyes still fixed on the file in front of him. Sophia stood there and waited. She'd faced enough kinds of people in her life to know this silence was a test, a way to measure whether she could be intimidated. She didn't move. At last, Marcus raised his head. His cold gray eyes swept over her, the way a man might assess something he'd just purchased. "There are 4 rules," he said, his voice without feeling. "First, follow medical protocol exactly. No improvising, no experimenting, no strange treatments you invent on your own." Sophia nodded. "Second, don't get attached. You're staff, not family. Do your job, take your pay, keep your distance." Sophia nodded again. "Third, don't hope. The doctors have given their conclusion. The children won't walk. Don't give them false hope, and don't give me false hope." Sophia swallowed something bitter in her throat, but she still nodded. Fourth, Marcus pointed to the corner of the room where a small camera blinked with a red light. "There are cameras everywhere. I see everything. I hear everything. Don't ever think you can hide anything from me." Sophia met his eyes. "I understand, Mr. Kane." Marcus studied her for a few more seconds, as if searching for a flicker of resistance, a spark of rebellion. But Sophia's face was as calm as a still lake. He flicked a hand, dismissing her. On the first night, Sophia lay in the small room set aside for staff, staring at the ceiling. She thought about the 4 rules, about Marcus Kane's icy stare, about the 3 children in the therapy room trapped inside bodies that didn't obey them. Then she got up. At 11 at night, Sophia walked into the therapy room. The dim glow of a nightlight fell over 3 small beds. Lucas, Ethan, and Noah lay there, their eyes open, but looking at nothing. Sophia knew the cameras were recording. She knew Marcus might be watching, but she didn't care. She pulled a chair into the space between the 3 beds and began to sing. Not a children's song, a sad ballad her mother used to sing when she was little. Her voice was soft and low-warm as water running in the dark. Then she went to Lucas's bed and began to massage the little boy's legs, not according to medical protocol, according to a pattern of her own, one she'd developed over years of working with children with cerebral palsy. Gentle movements, slow and steady, timed to the rhythm of the song. As she worked, Sophia's hand brushed against a photo album on the bookshelf beside the bed. She picked it up and opened it. Victoria Kane. Photographs of a beautiful woman with black hair and kind eyes. Victoria pregnant, her belly round and full. Victoria smiling, her hand resting on her stomach. And between the pages were handwritten letters. Sophia lifted the first letter and began to read. To Lucas, my firstborn son, you'll be the brave one. I know it because you were the first to kick inside me, like you were telling me you were ready to face the world. I love you, Lucas. Before I met you, I already loved you. Sophia's voice trembled slightly as she read. She moved on to the second letter, then the third. The love of a mother written to 3 children she'd never get to watch grow up. In the dark office, Marcus Kane stared at the camera feed. His hand gripped the armrest so hard, his knuckles went white. She dared to touch Victoria's things. She dared to read those letters, the letters he himself hadn't dared to open. He reached for his phone, ready to call Danny, to have her thrown out immediately. But then he saw it. On the screen in the dim therapy room, Light Lucas was smiling, his tiny mouth curved upward, his cheeks, lifting his eyes bright and alive. For the first time in 2 years, his son smiled. Marcus let the phone fall back to the desk. He stared at the screen, at Sophia reading Victoria's words, at Lucas smiling. He didn't call Danny. He sat there in the dark, watching a stranger do what he couldn't do, bring a smile to his son's face. He'd been watching the cameras to catch her making a mistake. Instead, he saw his child smile, and he didn't know which terrified him more. Marcus remembered the night they argued about the children's names. Victoria lay on the bed, her belly full and round, in her 7th month, her hand stroking the thin, taut skin in slow circles. She gave him a sheet of paper with 3 names written on it. Lucas, Ethan, Noah. Marcus stared at the page and frowned. Lucas means light, Ethan means strong, Noah means peace. Victoria explained, her eyes shining with happiness. Beautiful names, gentle names. Marcus shook his head. My sons need stronger names, names that make people fear them. Victoria looked at him, her warm brown eyes steady and unyielding. Our children will be gentle men, Marcus. This world already has enough kings. He wanted to argue. He wanted to say that in their world, gentleness meant death. But Victoria placed his hand on her belly, and he felt 3 small lives moving beneath his palm. I want them to know how to love before they learn how to fear, Victoria whispered. Promise me. And Marcus had promised, the way he always promised her everything. Now sitting in his dark office, Marcus watched the camera screen and wondered how many promises he'd kept. On the monitor, Sophia was singing. A week had passed since the first night, and she was still breaking every rule he'd set. She sang every night. She read Victoria's letters every night. She massaged the children's legs in strange patterns that weren't in any medical book. Marcus wanted to order her to stop, wanted to remind her who she was, who he was. But every night he saw something new. Tonight it was Ethan. As Sophia sang, Ethan's fingers moved. Not a spasm, a movement in rhythm, as if the little boy was trying to clap along with the song. Marcus rewound the footage, watched it again and again. Ethan's fingers were truly moving with the music. A knock at the door startled him. Margaret stepped in and set a cup of hot tea on the desk. "She reads Lady Victoria's letters to the children every night, sir." Marcus didn't respond. "The children are calmer, they sleep better, they cry less at night." "I know," Marcus said evenly. "I have cameras." Margaret lingered as if she wanted to say more, but in the end, she only nodded and left. Marcus wanted to forbid Sophia from reading those letters. They were Victoria's letters, his wife's last words to their children. An outsider had no right to touch them. But he remembered Victoria's voice. "I want them to know how to love before they learn how to fear." This was what Victoria wanted, and he had promised. At midnight, when the house had sunk into silence, Marcus stood in front of the nursery door, the pale yellow room Victoria had designed. He'd locked it 18 months earlier, after moving the children into the therapy room. He hadn't stepped inside since. Marcus's hand trembled slightly as he turned the key. The door opened and a familiar scent poured out. Victoria's perfume, the smell of paint, the clean scent of new wood from the cribs, now coated with a thin layer of dust. Marcus stepped in. Moonlight through the window fell across the mural of the moon and stars Victoria had painted with her own hands. He moved around the room, his fingers skimming the crib rails. The bookshelf filled with children's stories she'd bought before the boys were born. Then he saw it. A white envelope resting on the rocking chair where Victoria had once sat and dreamed of nights rocking her babies to sleep. The envelope had his name on it in Victoria's handwriting. Marcus picked it up and opened it with shaking hands. "Marcus, if I don't make it, promise me you'll hold the children. Not through cameras, with your own hands. I know you. I know you'll build walls around your heart. I know you'll think distance is protection. But the children need you, Marcus. They need a father, not a boss. Don't let the pain of losing me become the reason you lose them too. Love you forever, Victoria." Marcus stood there in the dark, the letter in his hand, tears streaming down his face, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. Victoria had known. Even then she had known he would run, and she had left him a map back to their children. Victoria's letter stayed in Marcus's jacket pocket for 3 days. He carried it everywhere as if letting it out of reach would mean losing her final voice. Every night he sat in his office, watching the cameras reading Victoria's words over and over. "Don't let the pain of losing me become the reason you lose them too." But how was he supposed not to lose them when he didn't even know how to hold on? At 11 at night on the 3rd day, Marcus didn't go into his office the way he always did. His feet carried him to the therapy room. He stood outside the door for a long time, listening to the soft singing drifting out. Sophia was still in there. She was always there at this hour. Marcus pushed the door open and walked in. Sophia looked up, a flicker of surprise, but no fear. She was sitting between the 3 beds, a book open on her lap. "Mr. Kane, you're still awake." It wasn't a question. Sophia met him calmly. They sleep better when someone stays with them. Marcus stepped closer and looked down at the 3 children lying quietly. Lucas and Ethan were asleep, their breathing even. Noah's eyes were still open, his small brown gaze fixed on the ceiling. "I saw you go into the nursery," Marcus said. Sophia didn't deny it. "I found the photo album there and the letters." "You had no right to go into that room." "I know." Sophia looked at him, her eyes not flinching. "But the children have a right to know their mother. You don't talk to them about her. No one in this house talks about her, as if she never existed." Marcus went rigid. He wanted to get angry, to order her to stop. But Victoria's words rang in his mind. The children need a father, not a boss. "She designed that room," Marcus heard himself say. "Spent 3 months choosing every detail. She wanted it perfect." Sophia listened in silence. "She painted the moon mural with her own hands," he went on. "She said she wanted the first thing the children saw when they woke up to be light." Marcus didn't know why he was saying these things to a stranger, a woman he'd bought to settle a debt. But in this room's darkness, with the steady beat of the heart monitor in the background, she didn't feel like a stranger. "She loved them so much," Sophia said softly. "I can read it in every line." Before Marcus could answer, Noah began to cry. Not the thin, weak crying he'd heard before. This was loud and sharp, as if the little boy was in pain. Sophia stood at once and lifted Noah. She held him against her chest, patted his back, whispered soothing words. But Noah wouldn't stop. The crying only grew louder, filling the room. Marcus stood there helpless, his hand clenched around the bed rail until his knuckles turned white. He wanted to do something, but he didn't know what. He was Marcus Kane. He ran an empire. He gave orders to hundreds of people. But in front of his own child's crying, he was completely useless. Sophia looked at him. She saw the helplessness in his eyes, the fear he tried to hide. "Hold him," she said. Marcus took a step back. "I don't know how. No one does until they do." Sophia moved closer, Noah still crying in her arms. "He's your son. He needs his father." Marcus wanted to run, to turn and walk away the way he'd done for 2 years. But Victoria's letter was in his pocket, heavy as stone. "With your own hands." Sophia gently placed Noah into Marcus's arms. The baby was so small, so light, his warm little body trembling with sobs. Marcus went rigid, not knowing where to put his hands, how to keep him safe. "Hold him tighter," Sophia guided her voice gentle. "He needs to feel you're here." Marcus tightened his arms a little. Noah kept crying. "Talk to him, anything." Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His throat closed. 2 years watching his children through a camera screen. 2 years standing outside the door, listening to their breathing, too afraid to go in. 2 years of running. "Daddy's here," Marcus whispered, his voice rough. "Daddy's here, Noah." And then the miracle happened. Noah stopped crying. The baby went still, his small brown eyes opening wide as he looked up at Marcus, as if he recognized him, as if he'd been waiting for this moment for 2 years. Marcus felt something break apart inside his chest. Tears spilled down his face and fell onto Noah's cheek. He didn't try to stop them. For the first time in 2 years, Marcus Kane held his child. Outside the door, Margaret stood in the dark with a hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her old face. She'd been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Noah weighed almost nothing, but in Marcus's arms he could feel the weight of 2 years of absence, and it nearly crushed him. The nightclub on Chicago's North Side throbbed under the weight of heavy bass, but in the VIP room on the highest floor the air was cold as ice. Vincent Torres sat in a black leather chair, turning a glass of whiskey in his hand. His eyes locked on the man kneeling in front of him. "Report?" Vincent said, his voice low and dangerous. "Kane is changing, sir." The man swallowed. "He's spending more time with the kids. He goes into the therapy room every night." "Someone saw him holding the youngest." Vincent set his whiskey down, his mouth curling into a cold smile. "So our king is learning to be a father. How touching." He stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city. 10 years he'd waited. 10 years rebuilding from the ashes after Marcus Kane had stolen everything from him. What about the new girl, Sophia Hayes, 27? Her father owed Kane $2 million and he's dead. Her mother killed herself. She's working to pay the debt. Vincent turned back, his eyes bright with calculation. A distracted king is a king about to die. Find that girl's weak point. Everyone has a weak point. 3 days later, Sophia was walking back from the pharmacy near the estate when a man approached her. He looked polite, wearing a gray suit, salt and pepper hair, a face that seemed trustworthy. "Ms. Hayes." Sophia stopped, instinctively wary. "Who are you?" "My name is Richard. I'm an attorney." He offered a business card. "I have information about your father's death." Sophia went rigid. "My father was in debt and he was killed. There's nothing to investigate." "Are you sure?" Richard tilted his head. "Do you know who truly ordered it? There's evidence your father didn't die because of debt. He knew something someone wanted him silent about." Sophia stared at the man, her heart beating faster. She knew she should walk away. She knew this could be a trap. But her father's face rose in her mind, Thomas Hayes. The man who once taught her integrity, the man who fell apart and died in shame. If there was a chance to clear his name. "Meet me at the coffee shop on Oak Street on Saturday at 2 in the afternoon, Richard said. "I'll show you the evidence." He walked away before Sophia could answer. At the same time, in the therapy room of the Kane mansion, Marcus was sitting in a chair beside the children's bed, a children's book in his hands. He looked down at the page filled with brightly colored animals and felt out of place. He ran a criminal empire. He read million-dollar contracts, financial reports, enemy dossiers. He didn't read children's books. Once upon a time, there was a little bear who lived in the forest. Marcus began, his voice stiff and awkward. He felt ridiculous. A mafia boss reading a story about a bear. But Sophia had said the children needed to hear. His voice needed to know he was here. The bear had 3 friends. A rabbit named Marcus looked down at the page, Snowflake. Lucas was watching him, not with the distant stare he wore most days, but with focused attention, as if he were listening to every word. Marcus kept reading, his voice slowly softening. He read one page after another, and when he looked up, all 3 children were asleep. Their faces were peaceful, their breathing steady. Marcus set the book down and watched them in silence. For the first time in 2 years, he felt something warm inside his chest. His phone vibrated in his pocket. "Danny." "Boss, we've got a problem." Danny's voice was tight. The girl, Sophia Hayes. She met one of Torres's people. Marcus went still. "What?" "One of Torres's men approached her today. They talked for about 5 minutes. I don't know what was said yet, but she took his business card. Marcus didn't answer. He looked down at his 3 children, sleeping in quiet peace angel faces that knew nothing about the brutal world beyond this room. His hand clenched around the phone until the casing creaked. 12 people had betrayed him. He should have known the 13th would be no different. But as he stared at the calm faces of his sons, Marcus realized that this time betrayal would cost him more than money. The next morning, Marcus stood in his office, waiting for Sophia. He hadn't slept all night. He'd replayed the footage of her meeting with the strange man again and again. He'd read Danny's report on Richard's true identity, a trusted operative of Vincent Torres. When Sophia walked in, she knew at once something was wrong. Marcus wasn't seated behind his desk the way he always was. He stood in the middle of the room with his back to her, hands clasped behind him, the posture of a king preparing to pass judgment. "Close the door," Marcus said, his voice cold as steel. Sophia did it, her heart beating faster. "What is it, Mr. Kane?" Marcus turned, and Sophia saw something she'd never seen in his eyes. Not pain, not exhaustion. Pure rage, perfectly controlled, cold, and lethal. "You met Torres's man. Don't lie to me." The blood drained from Sophia's face. "I didn't know who he was." "You didn't know?" Marcus stepped closer, each footfall ringing like a death bell. "You took his business card. You agreed to meet him. You think I don't have eyes everywhere. He said he was a lawyer. He said he could clear my father's name." Sophia's voice shook. "I didn't know he worked for Torres. I swear I didn't know." Marcus stopped one step away from her. He was nearly a head taller, and in this moment he wasn't the man who'd held Noah in the night. Not the awkward father reading a children's book. He was the king. The man who'd built an empire with blood and ruthlessness. 12 people before you betrayed me," Marcus said, his voice, even as if he were reading a death sentence. "Each one had a story, each one had a reason, and each one thought they could fool me. I'm not betraying you." Tears began to spill down Sophia's face. "I just want the truth about my father. He died in shame. I just want." "What you want doesn't matter." Marcus cut her off. "Danny." The door opened. Danny stepped in with 2 large men. "Take her to the basement," Marcus ordered. "Lock her up until I decide what to do." Sophia backed up a step. "No, please, I didn't do anything wrong. The children need me." "The children don't need a traitor." The 2 men moved in and seized Sophia by the arms. She didn't fight. She knew it was useless. As they dragged her out, Sophia turned back to Marcus one last time. "I didn't betray you," she said, choking on the words. "And whether you believe it or not, I love those children. They don't deserve to lose one more person." The door slammed shut. Marcus stood alone in the office, his breathing heavy. He'd done the right thing. He had to. In his world, hesitation meant death. Then the crying began. Not in the office, in the therapy room. Marcus ran into the hallway. The cries grew louder, sharp and piercing, tearing through the mansion's silence. He threw the therapy room door open. Lucas was crying. Not the thin, weak crying Marcus was used to hearing. This was a raw scream, strong and desperate. For the first time in 2 years, the boy was making a sound that loud. Ethan was screaming too, his small body jerking on the bed, his arms and legs flailing. Noah was the opposite. His eyes were shut, his body completely still, as if he'd retreated into another world to escape. Margaret came running, her face drained of color. "Sir, they've never been like this, never." She looked at Marcus, her eyes full of fear. "They know she's gone. They know." Marcus stood in the middle of the room, staring at his 3 children as they screamed. The children the doctors said couldn't feel, couldn't understand. The children he'd kept at a distance because he believed they didn't know whether he was there or not. They knew. They knew Sophia had been taken away, and they were calling for her. Lucas kept crying, the sound beginning to go hoarse with exhaustion. His eyes were fixed on the door as if he were waiting for someone to come in. Not Marcus, Sophia, the woman who sang to them every night, the woman who read Victoria's letters to them, the woman who made them smile, made them respond, made them come alive again. Marcus felt something collapse inside his chest. He'd spent 2 years watching his children through a camera while they gave him nothing. Sophia had been here 2 weeks, and they were screaming when she left. The children loved her. The children needed her. And he'd just ordered the only person who had brought them back to life locked away. His children the doctors said couldn't feel, couldn't understand, were screaming for her. And Marcus realized he was about to destroy the only person who had made them human again. The sound of the children's crying still echoed in Marcus's head as he went down to the basement. 2 hours. 2 hours of him trying to soothe them, and nothing had worked. Lucas cried until exhaustion finally pulled him into sleep. Ethan, still startled, now and then screaming out. Noah wouldn't open his eyes, as if he'd decided a world without Sophia wasn't worth looking at. Margaret had to stay and watch over them because no one else could calm them. The last room at the end of the basement hall was used for holding people. It wasn't a dungeon, just a small room with a bed, a light, and a private bathroom. Marcus didn't torture women. He only needed a place to keep them until he decided their fate. He signaled the guard to unlock the door, then stepped inside alone. Sophia sat on the bed with her back against the wall, knees drawn up to her chest. Her eyes were red from crying, but when she saw Marcus, she didn't look afraid. Only tired and something that looked like acceptance. "Did you come to kill me?" Sophia asked, her voice rough. Marcus didn't answer. He pulled a chair closer and sat across from her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. "The children cried," Marcus said at last. "From the moment you were taken, they haven't stopped." Sophia closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I know, I heard. The sound carries down here." "Tell me," Marcus said. "Tell me everything from the beginning." Sophia opened her eyes, surprised. She thought he'd come to accuse her, to interrogate her, to threaten her, but his voice didn't carry the fury it had that morning. There was only exhaustion in it, and maybe, somewhere underneath, the need to understand. "That man approached me when I was buying medicine for the children," Sophia began. "He said he was a lawyer. He said he had evidence my father didn't die because of debt, but because he knew something dangerous." She drew a shaky breath. "My father died in disgrace. People thought he was a useless gambling addict, but he used to be a good doctor. He used to save people. I just wanted the truth. I didn't know that man belonged to Torres. I swear to you I didn't." Marcus watched her for a long time. He'd interrogated hundreds of people in his life. He knew when someone was lying. Sophia wasn't lying. "Why do you care that much?" Marcus asked. "Your father is dead. Knowing the truth won't change anything." Sophia gave a small, bitter laugh, a smile that hurt like a cut. because he was all I had left. After I lost, she stopped, her voice catching. After I lost my baby. Marcus went still. Your baby. I was 6 months pregnant. Sophia looked down at her hands clenched on her knees. My boyfriend Ryan, the baby's father. I thought he loved me. I thought we were going to be a family. She drew a deep breath. One night he was drunk. We argued about money. He pushed me down the stairs. Tears ran down her face, but Sophia's voice stayed level, as if she'd told this story too many times in her own mind. She didn't make it. A baby girl. I named her Lily. Marcus didn't speak. He couldn't. The doctors said my uterus was badly damaged. I might never be able to have children again. Sophia lifted her eyes to him, red and swollen, but unflinching. I lost my daughter. I lost the ability to be a mother. Then I lost my father. Then I lost my mother. In 2 years, I lost everything. Marcus looked down at Sophia's hands, and he saw them. Faint scars on her wrists, parallel lines, old healed but still there like a warning. Sophia saw where his eyes went. She didn't hide it. After Lily died, I didn't want to live anymore. I tried, once. She turned her wrist so he could see more clearly. My mother found me in time. Marcus thought of Victoria, of the nights he'd wanted to follow her, of the times he'd held a gun, and wondered if pulling the trigger would make the pain stop. He understood. He understood better than anyone. Your children are still here, Sophia said, and her voice grew stronger. They're still fighting. Every day they fight their own bodies. I couldn't save Lily, but please let me save them. Marcus stared at her for a long time. A question rose in his mind, one he couldn't not ask. Why? After everything you've lived through, why do you still believe? Why can you still love? Sophia smiled, sad but honest. Because Lily would want me to. She'd want me to keep living, keep loving, keep believing. She looked straight into Marcus's eyes, the way Victoria would want you to. Something broke open in Marcus's chest. Victoria's letter was still in his pocket. Don't let the pain of losing me become the reason you lose them too. Sophia wasn't a traitor. She was someone broken who refused to accept brokenness as the end. And for the first time, Marcus saw what he could become if he was brave enough. Marcus rose from the chair. He looked at Sophia for a long moment, then said 2 words he rarely said to anyone. I'm sorry. Sophia looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. Marcus didn't explain. He opened the door and signaled to the guard, Take her upstairs, she's free. Then he walked away without looking back. His footsteps echoed through the basement corridor as he climbed the stairs heading for the therapy room. The crying was still there, smaller now, weaker, but still sharp as a blade. Margaret was sitting between the 3 beds, her face drawn with exhaustion. When she saw Marcus, she stood. They won't sleep, sir. I've tried everything. Marcus nodded. Let me. Margaret studied him for a moment, then quietly stepped out and pulled the door closed behind her. Marcus stood in the middle of the room and looked at his 3 sons. Lucas was still sobbing, the sound hoarse from screaming too long. Ethan lay still, but his eyes were wide open, as if he was afraid that if he blinked, he'd lose someone else. Noah kept his eyes shut, curled into a tiny ball. Marcus didn't think anymore. He went to Lucas's bed and gently lifted him. Then he sat in the rocking chair in the middle of the room and gathered Ethan and Noah into his arms. 3 small bodies, warm, trembling. Marcus held all 3 close, feeling every breath, every small movement. Daddy's here, he whispered, his voice catching. "Daddy's here, she'll come back, I promise." It was the first time Marcus called himself their daddy in front of them. Not Mr. Kane, not father. Daddy, the tender word Victoria had said she wanted the children to use. Lucas stopped crying. He looked up at Marcus, his brown eyes still red, but calmer now. Then a tiny hand reached out and closed around Marcus's finger, tight, as if he was afraid that if he let go, Marcus would disappear. Marcus felt tears sliding down his cheeks. He didn't try to stop them. He sat there holding his 3 sons until all 3 drifted into sleep. Then he gently laid them back down, tucked each one in, and stepped outside. Danny was waiting in the hallway. "Boss," Marcus looked at his right hand, and his gray eyes were no longer filled with grief. They were ice cold, dangerous. This was the gaze of the king. "Torres touched my family," Marcus said, his voice low and deadly. "That ends tonight." Danny nodded. "I'll call the men." An hour later, a convoy of black vehicles tore through the Chicago night toward the north side. Vincent Torres's club sat on the top floor of an old building guarded by dozens of gunmen. But Marcus Kane hadn't come to negotiate. Gunfire cracked through the darkness. The club doors were kicked in. Marcus's men surged inside, like a black flood wiping out every bit of resistance in their path. Vincent Torres was in the VIP room when the door burst open. Marcus walked in his black suit, speckled with blood, but none of it was his. 2 of Vincent's gunmen raised their weapons, but Danny was faster. 2 shots, 2 bodies hit the floor. Vincent stood and backed toward the wall, still trying to keep his composure. "Kane, I guess my tactic didn't work." Marcus moved closer, each step slow and deliberate. "That girl has nothing, she's just paying a debt." Vincent let out a sharp laugh. "And you still came here for a maid." He shook his head. "So our king is playing house now, sitting at home reading stories to 3 crippled kids." Marcus stopped 1 step away from him. "I protect what's mine. You should have known that." "You're weak, Kane." Vincent spat on the floor. "You let feelings rule you. That's why you'll fall." Marcus didn't answer. He only looked at Vincent with eyes as cold as winter. Then he turned to Danny. "Don't kill him." Vincent blinked, startled. "Take everything," Marcus went on. "Territory, money, men, everything he has. Let him live, but with nothing." He looked back at Vincent one last time. 10 years ago, I took everything from you and you rebuilt. This time, I'll make sure you have nothing left to build with." Marcus walked out without looking back, even as Vincent's furious shouting followed him. The convoy returned to the estate at 3 in the morning. Marcus stepped out of the car, his suit still carrying the sharp stink of gunpowder. Danny tried to report, but Marcus waved him off. "Tomorrow morning." He went into the house, past his office without stopping. For the first time in 2 years, he didn't need to watch the cameras. He didn't need reports. He didn't need control. He only needed one place, the therapy room. Marcus pushed the door open. His 3 sons were still asleep, their faces peaceful under the dim nightlight. Sophia sat in the chair in the corner. She'd come back here as soon as she was released. She looked at Marcus, gave a small nod, then stood and stepped aside. Marcus sat in the rocking chair and watched his children. He stayed there until dawn began to pale through the window. He'd built an empire on fear. But that night, sitting beside his sleeping sons, Marcus Kane realized the only kingdom that truly mattered was this room. The following week, life inside the Kane mansion changed completely. Danny noticed it first when he arrived at 7 in the morning to give his work report and found Marcus's office empty. He found his boss in the therapy room instead, sitting beside Lucas's bed, speaking to the little boy in a low, gentle voice Danny had never heard in 20 years of working at his side. It became Marcus's new habit. Every morning before he began his work, he went into the therapy room. He greeted each of his sons, asked if they'd slept well. Even though he knew they couldn't answer, told them what he'd be doing that day. Every evening he returned with a children's book in his hands. Marcus's reading was still stiff and awkward. He didn't know how to change his voice, for each character didn't know how to make playful sounds the way ordinary fathers did, but the boys didn't care. Lucas always watched him closely when he read his brown eyes tracking every movement of his father's lips. Ethan would move his fingers in time with Marcus's voice, as if keeping rhythm for a song only he could hear. Noah would open his eyes and stay still, something he'd rarely done before. One night, Sophia was massaging Ethan's legs when she suggested Marcus sing. He looked at her as if she'd asked him to dance ballet in the middle of a board meeting. "I don't know how to sing." "The children don't care if you sing well or badly. They just want to hear your voice." Marcus looked down at Lucas on the bed, the little boy's eyes fixed on him with expectation. He drew a deep breath and began to sing. It was a lullaby his mother used to sing when he was small before she died, before his father was killed, before he became the king. Marcus's voice was deep, rough, and completely offbeat. He forgot the words halfway through and had to hum his way past them. He sang the wrong notes on almost every line. Sophia covered her mouth, trying not to laugh, but her shoulders shook. Marcus shot her a look of mock annoyance. "Are you laughing at me?" "No, I'm just." Sophia couldn't hold it in anymore, and the laugh burst out. And then the miracle happened. Lucas laughed too. His tiny mouth curved up his cheeks, lifted, and something like a laugh slipped from his throat. Ethan began making happy sounds as well, his arms and legs moving as if he were dancing. Even Noah opened his eyes and looked around with curiosity. The room filled with laughter for the first time in 2 years. Margaret stood outside the door with a hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her old face. She'd served the Kane family for 20 years, had watched Marcus grow from a grieving teenage boy into a cold, ruthless boss, and now she was watching him become human again. Lady Victoria would be so happy, she whispered to herself. In the days that followed, Sophia taught Marcus everything. How to hold his son's hands the right way so he wouldn't hurt them. How to massage their legs to stimulate blood flow. How to talk to them, not as patients but as ordinary children who were listening to every word. Marcus learned. He, the man who ran a criminal empire, who gave orders to hundreds of people, sat down and learned how to be a father from a 27-year-old woman he'd bought to pay a debt. One evening while practicing how to massage Noah's legs, Marcus stopped and looked down at his own hands. Hands that had once held guns, had once signed death orders, were now gently rubbing his son's tiny legs. "I missed too much," he said, his voice tightening. Sophia looked up at him. She didn't offer cheap comfort, didn't tell him everything would be fine. She only told the truth. "You're here now. That's what matters most." Marcus looked at her, then down at Noah, sleeping peacefully in his hands. The boy trusted him. Even after 2 years of absence, even after Marcus had run, Noah still trusted him. All of them did. And this time, Marcus wouldn't betray that trust. He was learning to be their father, not through orders or cameras, through touch, through presence, through love. The fourth week marked changes no one had dared to dream of. Sophia recorded every smallest improvement with careful precision in her report notebook. On day 22, Lucas held his head up for 47 seconds. Not 47 ordinary seconds, but 47 seconds in which he lifted his head on his own, without anyone supporting him, his eyes fixed straight ahead, with a focus the doctors had once said was impossible. On day 24, Ethan reached out and touched Sophia's face while she was singing. Not a random movement, but a deliberate one, a small hand stretching out to rest on her cheek, as if he were trying to say thank you in the only way he could. Sophia cried for 10 full minutes after that moment. On day 26, Noah kept his eyes open for the entire therapy session. He, the child who always kept his eyes shut, as if he wanted to hide from the world, held them open and watched everything around him with curiosity. He watched Sophia. He watched Marcus. He watched sunlight spill through the window as if he were discovering a new world he'd just decided to join. But the most important moment came on day 28. That afternoon, Marcus was sitting beside Lucas's bed, reading a story about adventurous dogs. He finished and set the book down, about to stand and wash his hands before dinner. And then Lucas moved. Not the small movements Marcus had learned to notice, but something clear and intentional. Lucas reached toward him. The small arm trembled with effort, yet still stretched forward, the fingers opening, as if he wanted to grasp something, to grasp his father. Marcus froze. He stared at his son's arm reaching for him, and something shattered inside his chest. 2 years. 2 years of standing at a distance. 2 years of watching through cameras. 2 years of waiting for a sign, any sign at all, that his children knew he existed. And now Lucas was reaching for him. For the first time, the boy was choosing on his own to come to his father. Marcus lifted Lucas and held him against his chest. Tears ran down Marcus's face, and he didn't care. He didn't care if Danny saw. He didn't care if the whole world saw. "Daddy's here, my son," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. "Daddy's here now." Lucas rested his head against Marcus's chest, and for the first time he made a soft sound like a satisfied sigh. Sophia stood in the corner and quietly wiped her tears. That night she wrote her day 28 report. The children now respond to both voices, mine and their father's. They know they're loved. She set her pen down and looked out the window. This was something she hadn't dared to hope for when she stepped into this house. Out in the hallway, Margaret was talking with Danny. They both stood watching the therapy room through the half-open door where Marcus sat holding Lucas with Ethan and Noah resting peacefully on either side. "He's different," Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion. "The man I knew 20 years ago, before the empire, before the blood, he's coming back." Danny shook his head. "No." Margaret looked at him surprised. "He's becoming a better man." Danny said, his eyes still on the room. "Not going back, moving forward." Margaret smiled, tears sliding down her cheeks. She'd been waiting for this moment since the day Victoria died. In the therapy room, Marcus stayed there, his son in his arms, watching the last light of sunset fade through the window. The doctors said it couldn't happen, but every day 3 small boys proved them wrong. And every day a broken father learned how to hope again. Sophia knocked on Marcus's office door on the evening of day 29. He was sitting behind his desk, but not to read business reports or watch camera footage the way he used to. He was looking at a photograph of Victoria, now placed back on the desk after 2 years face down in a drawer. "Come in," Marcus said when he heard the knock. Sophia stepped inside, her expression serious, but her eyes lit with something that looked like hope. "I want to try something tomorrow," she said, stopping in front of his desk. "I want the children to stand." Marcus went still. His hands settled on the desk, his fingers tightening. "Stand." Lucas held his head up for nearly a minute. "Ethan can control his arm. Noah is trying every day." Sophia moved a little closer. "I think they're ready." Marcus rose and turned his back to her, staring out the window. Chicago's darkness stretched beyond the glass, the lights blinking like falling stars. "What if they fall?" "They will fall," Sophia said plainly, "but they'll get back up." Marcus turned to look at her. In his eyes was fear he didn't try to hide, the fear of a father who'd already lost too much. The doctors said they'd never be able to stand. The doctors also said they couldn't smile, couldn't respond, couldn't recognize anyone. Sophia gave a small smile. "They've proved them wrong." Marcus didn't answer. He studied her for a long time, then nodded. "All right, tomorrow." That night, when the whole house had fallen asleep, Marcus quietly went into the therapy room. He sat beside Lucas's bed first, studying the angel face sleeping in peace. "You're the brave one," he whispered. "Your mother wrote that in her letter. She knew it before you were even born. And your father sees it every day." He stood and moved to Ethan's bed. "You're strong. I see it in the way you try, in the way you never quit." At last he went to Noah, the youngest, the most fragile, and the one who worried him most. "You're peace, but I know there's a fighter inside you. I've watched you battle since the first day you were born." Marcus closed his eyes, and memory rushed in. Victoria lying on the bed, her belly full and round her hand, gripping his with excitement. "They're kicking, all three at once. They're fighting to come out." "Eli," Marcus had laughed and placed his hand on his wife's belly. "Fighters like their father." Victoria had looked at him, warm brown eyes overflowing with love. "And they know how to love, like their mother." Marcus opened his eyes. Tears slid down his cheeks. He looked at his 3 sleeping sons, 3 small lives that had been fighting from the first second they entered the world. Fighters and able to love, just as Victoria had said. Tomorrow would change everything. Marcus didn't know how, but for the first time in 2 years he wasn't afraid. He was ready. 3 in the afternoon. Marcus was sitting in the conference room, surrounded by the most powerful underbosses in his empire. They were discussing westward expansion, million-dollar deals, enemies who needed to be handled. Meetings like this used to be everything to Marcus. They used to be the reason he existed. But today his eyes kept dropping to the watch on his wrist. 3:05, 3:10. Sophia said she'd begin at 3:15. Danny was presenting on an important weapons deal when Marcus stood up. Everyone in the room fell silent, staring at him in surprise. "Danny, you handle it," Marcus said, already moving toward the door. "I've got somewhere I need to be." Danny didn't ask. After 20 years, he knew when not to ask. Marcus drove home faster than usual. His heart hammered in his chest, a feeling he wasn't used to. Fear, hope, and something else he couldn't name. He walked into the mansion, moved quickly down the hall, heading for the living room. And then he saw it. 3 wheelchairs pushed neatly into the corner, empty. In the center of the living room, on a green yoga mat, Sophia had spread out. His 3 sons were standing. Lucas, Ethan, Noah. 3 small bodies, trembling like leaves in wind, but standing on their own legs. Margaret was bracing them lightly from behind, ready to catch someone if they fell. But no one had fallen yet. Sophia knelt on the floor about 5 steps away. Her arms were open wide, her eyes wet with tears, but she was smiling. "Come to me, babies," she whispered. "You can do it." Marcus stood in the doorway, his feet nailed to the floor. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He could only stare at 3 children, doing what every doctor in the world had said would never happen. Sophia saw him. She didn't speak. She only nodded toward the open space beside her. Marcus understood. He walked over and knelt beside Sophia. Together they held their arms out toward the boys. "Come to us," Marcus said, his voice rough. Lucas moved first. His right foot lifted, trembling, then came down. 1 step, then the left, 2 steps. He wobbled, nearly fell, but caught his balance and kept going. 3 steps, 4. Ethan followed behind his brother. His legs shook even harder, his body swaying as if he might collapse any second. But he didn't stop. 1 step, 2 steps. Sweat beaded on his small forehead, but he still pushed forward. 3 steps. Noah stayed still. The youngest, the most fragile, watching his brothers with wide open eyes. He wanted to move. Marcus could see it in his son's gaze, but those little legs wouldn't obey. "Noah," Marcus called, his voice breaking. He opened his arms toward his youngest. "Come here, my son, Daddy's here." Noah looked at his father. Small brown eyes fixed on Marcus's face, as if he were searching for strength. Then he moved. The right foot lifted. 1 step. Marcus stopped breathing. The left foot. 2 steps. Tears started sliding down Marcus's cheeks. The right foot again. 3 steps. And then all 3 boys fell into Marcus and Sophia's arms. Lucas hit Marcus's chest. Ethan sagged into Sophia's shoulder. Noah, with those last 3 steps, threw himself into the space between the 2 adults. Marcus wrapped his arms around all 3, pulling them close, not caring that tears were pouring down his face like water. He cried, openly, unashamed, uncontrolled. The cry of a man who'd been waiting for this moment for 2 years. The cry of a father seeing his children walk for the first time. Sophia was crying too, holding Ethan and Noah, her shoulders shaking with emotion. Margaret stood behind them, both hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her old face. "You did it," Marcus whispered, kissing the head of each child. "You did it. I'm so proud of you." His children had walked. 3 steps, 4 steps, it didn't matter how many. They had walked. And Marcus Kane the King, who'd accepted that the impossible was the end, held his sons as they rewrote everything. They sat on the living room floor, 4 human beings tangled together in the afternoon sun pouring through the glass. Marcus wouldn't let his sons go. He held all 3 tight, feeling every small breath, every heartbeat, every tiniest movement in bodies that had just done the impossible. His tears kept falling, and he didn't try to stop them. He'd stopped them for far too long. "I'm sorry, my sons," Marcus whispered, his voice so choked he had to pause to catch his breath. "I'm sorry for everything, for every day I wasn't with you, for every night I watched you through a camera screen instead of holding you in my arms." He kissed Lucas's head, then Ethan's, then Noah's. "I was afraid to love you and then lose you the way I lost your mother. afraid to hope and be disappointed, afraid to come close and not survive the pain. Marcus drew a shaking breath. But I was wrong. I was wrong for 2 years. You needed your father, and I wasn't there. Lucas moved in Marcus's arms. The little boy's hand lifted and touched his father's cheek. Tiny fingers brushed the skin wet with tears, as if Lucas were trying to wipe away his father's pain. Marcus closed his eyes, and a sob broke loose from his throat. His son, the child the doctors said couldn't feel, couldn't understand, was comforting him, telling him in the only way he could that everything would be all right. Sophia quietly eased back. She felt this was a private moment between father and children, with no room for an outsider. She'd done her part. Now it was time for Marcus and his sons to mend what had been lost. But as she rose to step away, Ethan reached toward her. A small arm stretching out, fingers opening as if he wanted to catch her, pull her back. Then Noah did it too. The youngest, the weakest, reaching for Sophia with a determination she'd never seen in him before. Sophia froze, looking down at the 2 children reaching for her. Tears rose again, hot in her eyes. Marcus looked up and saw Sophia standing there, saw his sons calling for her. He reached out and took her wrist. "Stay," he said, his voice rough but certain. "You're part of this family." Sophia looked at him, then down at the 3 boys. She knelt, and at once Ethan and Noah leaned into her while Lucas stayed in Marcus's arms. 4 people on the floor, holding each other, crying and laughing at the same time. Margaret stood in the living room doorway, both hands over her mouth, her shoulders trembling with emotion. She'd served the Kane family for 20 years. She'd watched Victoria walk into this house as a new bride. She'd watched the joy when Victoria announced she was pregnant. She'd watched the grief when Victoria was taken away. And now she was watching a miracle. "Lady Victoria," Margaret whispered, tears streaming down her old face. "She's watching, sir. I know she's watching." Marcus lifted his head. His eyes went to the ceiling, then to the window, where late afternoon light spilled in like warm gold. And in that moment he felt Victoria's presence. Not a ghost, not a hallucination, but her love still here, still wrapping itself around him and their children. "I kept my promise," Marcus whispered, as if speaking to someone no one else could see. "They know how to love, not fear." He looked down at the 3 boys in their arms, then over at Sophia, the woman who'd come as a debt and stayed as a miracle. "Victoria would love you," Marcus told Sophia. "She'd be grateful for everything you've done for our children." Sophia smiled through her tears. "I think she sent me," she said softly. "Maybe that's how she takes care of them when she can't be here." Marcus didn't answer. He only tightened his hold on Sophia's hand and looked down at the 3 boys resting peacefully in their arms. Lucas was asleep, exhausted after the effort of walking. Ethan blinked slowly, fighting to keep his eyes open, but too tired. Noah's eyes had been closed for a while, but his mouth curved into a faint smile. 4 people on the living room floor, 3 small miracles. A broken family at last becoming whole. A week had passed since the day the miracle happened. A week in which life inside the Kane mansion changed completely, inside and out. Marcus no longer sat in his office at 2 a.m. watching the cameras. He didn't need to. Every night he slept on the sofa in the therapy room, only a few steps from his sons' beds. If one of them cried, he was the first one there. If one of them woke, he was the first face they saw. The camera screens in his office were still there, but they were gathering dust. Marcus Kane didn't need to see his children through a screen anymore. He saw them with his own eyes, touched them with his own hands, loved them with his own heart. One afternoon, Marcus called Sophia into his office. She walked in uneasy, not knowing what he wanted. He was standing by the window, sunlight falling across a face that held less tension than it had a month ago. "Your debt has been erased," Marcus said, turning to look at her. "You're free." Sophia went still. She stared at him, not sure she'd heard right. "You mean I should leave?" Marcus stepped closer, his gray eyes no longer as cold as the first day she arrived. They were warm now, honest, and held something that looked like worry. "No, I want you to stay." He paused as if searching for the right words. Not as staff, as family. Sophia felt tears rise. Family, a word she hadn't heard since her mother died. A thing she thought she'd lost forever. She began, but her voice caught. Marcus reached out and took her hand. "You saved my sons. You saved me. This is your home, Sophia, if you want it." Sophia nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I do. I want to stay." That evening, for the first time in 2 years, the mansion's dining room was used. Margaret had spent the entire day preparing. The table was draped in a white cloth, candles were lit, and 3 special high chairs were set beside the table for the boys. Marcus sat at the head, Sophia on his right, Margaret on his left. Lucas, Ethan, and Noah sat in their high chairs, each with a small bowl of porridge and soft food cut into tiny pieces. Dinner was chaos. Lucas spilled porridge down his shirt. Ethan threw his spoon to the floor 3 times. Noah decided smearing food on his face was more interesting than eating it. Marcus, the man who'd once run a criminal empire with an iron hand, sat there with porridge on the shoulder of his suit, trying to convince Noah that food belonged in his mouth. And he laughed. Marcus's laughter filled the dining room, mixing with the boys babbling Sophia's quiet giggles, and Margaret scolding them with affection, telling them this was dinner, not a battlefield. The room was loud, messy, alive. Danny stopped by just as dinner ended. He stood in the doorway watching Marcus wipe Noah's face, while Sophia tried to pick food out of Ethan's hair. Margaret stepped out and stood beside Danny. "I've never seen him like this," Danny said, his voice low with disbelief. Margaret smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "This is the man he was meant to become. Lady Victoria always knew that." Danny nodded and said nothing more. He only stood there watching his boss, the most feared man in Chicago, laughing with his children and competing for the towel with a young woman. A mansion that had been a tomb for 2 years was finally becoming a home. 3 months later, the pale yellow nursery Victoria had designed was finally opened again. The cribs had been replaced with 3 small lovely beds, arranged in a half circle, just as Victoria had once dreamed, so the boys could see one another when they woke. The mural of the moon and stars was wiped clean of dust and glowed each night beneath a gentle nightlight. Lucas, Ethan, and Noah slept here now, in the room their mother had built with her whole heart. Every morning Marcus walked into the nursery, sat beside each bed, and woke each son. "Ready to walk today, my son?" He asked that question every day, and every day the answer came in smiles and small arms reaching up to be held. Lucas and Ethan could now take a few steps without anyone supporting them. The steps were still shaky, still unsteady, but they were their own. Noah, the youngest, still needed someone's hand when he walked. But he was improving in his own way, and to Marcus, every small step Noah took was a great victory. That afternoon, golden sunlight flooded through the living room windows and spilled across the wooden floor like a carpet of light. Marcus sat on the floor with his 3 sons gathered around him. Lucas was playing with colorful wooden blocks. Ethan was trying to reach a ball that had rolled out of range. Noah lay against his father's chest, brown eyes turned up to the ceiling in quiet peace. Sophia sat beside Marcus, her shoulder resting lightly against his. On the opposite wall, Victoria's photograph had been hung again. She smiled from the frame, warm brown eyes, as if still watching over her family. And right beside that picture, a new photograph had been placed. Marcus, Sophia, and the 3 boys. A new family. Lucas suddenly stopped playing. He lifted his gaze to the wall, his eyes settling on Victoria's picture. Then he raised his hand and pointed, and a sound slipped from his small lips. "Mama." Marcus went still. His heart seemed to miss a beat. He looked at his son, then at Victoria's photograph, then back at his son. Tears rose in his eyes. "That's right, my son," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. "That's Mommy. Mommy loves you. She loves you so much." Sophia reached for Marcus's hand. He took hers and held on tight. And in that moment, sitting on the living room floor with his 3 sons and the woman who had saved him, Marcus Kane looked up at Victoria's photograph and whispered in his heart. Victoria had asked him to let their sons learn love, not fear. It had taken 2 years, a broken woman, and 3 small miracles for him to understand. But at last he did. Miracles don't ask permission. They only need someone brave enough to believe they can happen. The story ends here today, but its message lives on. Sometimes life pushes us into the darkest corners, where hope feels like a luxury and faith becomes a burden. But remember this, even in the thickest darkness, light can still find a way in. Marcus lost his wife, nearly lost his sons, and almost lost himself to grief. But he found it all again through one simple thing, daring to open his heart and love again. And what about you? How did this story make you feel? Was there a moment that touched your heart? Did anything in this story remind you of your own real life? Share with us in the comments below. We'd truly love to hear what you feel in the deepest part of your heart. If this story touched you, please hit the like button and share this video with anyone you think needs to hear it. Sometimes the right story at the right time can change a whole day, even a whole life. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the moving stories we bring you every day. Finally, we wish all of you watching this video good health, a joyful life, and a peaceful spirit each day. Thank you for staying with us through this entire story. Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next video.